The Westmore family weddings had always been lavish affairs, picture-perfect celebrations held at exclusive venues, with guest lists that read like a who's who of successful professionals and old money. The upcoming nuptials of Alex Westmore and his fiancée, Sophia, were expected to be no different, perhaps even grander than usual, given that Alex was the golden child of the family. Eliza Chin Westmore stared at her reflection in the hotel mirror, smoothing down the emerald silk dress she'd spent weeks selecting. The color brought out the warm undertones in her olive skin and complemented her dark, almond-shaped eyes that currently held a shadow of apprehension. "Are you almost ready?" James called from the bathroom, his voice carrying that edge of impatience that had become all too familiar over the past 2 years of their marriage. "We're supposed to be at the venue in 20 minutes. "Just finishing up," Eliza replied, reaching for her simple pearl earrings, a graduation gift from her grandmother, one of the few family heirlooms she possessed. James emerged, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit. At 34, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. His sharp features and piercing blue eyes, inherited from his mother Eleanor, could be captivating when he smiled. But those smiles had become increasingly rare in Eliza's presence. He glanced at her briefly. "That dress is a bit much, don't you think?" Eliza's hand froze midway to her ear. "Too much? It's a formal wedding. It's just very attention-seeking. My mother mentioned that Sophia chose a color palette for the family, and emerald wasn't on it." Eliza fought to keep her expression neutral. "You never mentioned a color palette, James. I don't have anything else formal enough for this wedding." James sighed, checking his watch. "It's fine. We don't have time to change now anyway. Just try not to stand out, okay? This day is about Alex and Sophia, not us. Not us." The words echoed in Eliza's mind as they rode in silence to Rosewood Estate, a historic mansion overlooking vineyard-covered hills. Not us had become James's mantra whenever they attended family functions. Not us meant not you. It hadn't always been this way. When they'd met 3 years ago at a charity gala, Eliza covering the event as a junior journalist, James attending as a donor, he had been drawn to her quiet confidence and perceptive questions. He pursued her with an intensity that had taken her breath away, showering her with attention and seeming genuinely interested in her passion for photojournalism and storytelling. But something had shifted after their wedding. As if once the chase was over, James's interest had waned. Or perhaps it was a subtle disapproval from his family that had caused him to create distance to raised eyebrows when they learned Eliza was the daughter of Chinese immigrants who owned a modest restaurant in the city, the thinly veiled suggestions that she wasn't quite Westmore material. Eliza had tried desperately to fit in, even giving up her budding journalism career when James suggested her traveling for assignments wasn't compatible with the lifestyle of a Westmore wife. She convinced herself it was temporary, that once she'd earned her place in the family, she could return to her passions. But 2 years later, she felt more invisible than ever. The car pulled up to the circular driveway of Rosewood Estate, where valets in crisp uniforms waited to assist guests. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees lining the entrance, and elegant floral arrangements framed the massive wooden doors. "Remember," James murmured as they walked toward the entrance, his hand barely touching the small of her back, "my mother is already stressed about everything being perfect for Alex. Let's not add to that stress." Translation: don't speak unless spoken to. Don't mention your background. Don't do anything that might embarrass the family. Eliza nodded, slipping her camera phone into her clutch. At least she could capture some beautiful moments quietly. Photography had always been her refuge. Seeing the world through a lens sometimes made it easier to bear. The ceremony was undeniably beautiful. Rows of white chairs had been arranged in the estate's rose garden, facing an elegant pergola draped with cascading white flowers and greenery. As Alex stood waiting for his bride, sunlight filtering through the foliage created a dappled golden effect that made the scene look almost magical. Eliza itched to capture it, but James's warning glance when she reached for her phone stopped her. Instead, she watched as Sophia glided down the aisle in a gown that seemed to float around her like a cloud, her face radiant with happiness behind her veil. During the reception, Eliza found herself directed to a table in the far corner of the ballroom, away from James and the rest of the Westmore family, who occupied the central tables. Her table mates were distant acquaintances of the bride's family, pleasant enough, but clearly confused about why a member of the groom's family had been seated with them. "My husband is the brother of the groom," Eliza explained with a practiced smile when asked. "He's sitting with his parents and the wedding party." "And you're not?" a gray-haired woman asked bluntly, her eyes kind but puzzled. "Limited space at the head table," Eliza replied smoothly, the lie rolling off her tongue from repetition at countless other events. James visited her table briefly, champagne flute in hand. "Everything good here?" he asked, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Perfect," Eliza assured him. "The ceremony was beautiful." "Mother outdid herself with the planning," he agreed, then lowered his voice. "Try the salmon instead of the beef. The caterer told me it's their specialty." It was the longest conversation they'd had all day. After he left, Eliza excused herself and walked out onto the terrace, needing a moment alone. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the vineyards below. She took a deep breath of the fragrant air, trying to center herself. Stunning view, isn't it? Eliza turned to find a man in his 40s with a camera hanging around his neck, clearly one of the wedding photographers. "Breathtaking," she agreed. "You must be having a field day with all these perfect shots." He laughed. "Marco Vasquez," he introduced himself. "And yes, but sometimes it's overwhelming deciding what to focus on." "I'd start with the way the light is hitting those distant hills," Eliza said without thinking. "The contrast between the golden vineyards and the purple shadows forming in the valleys tells a story of its own." Marco gave her an appraising look. "Photographer?" "Used to be," Eliza admitted. "Photojournalism, mainly. Just a hobby now." "Shame to waste that eye," he commented, then glanced at his watch. "I should get back inside. The first dance is starting soon." Eliza followed him back to the ballroom, where the lights had been dimmed and the dance floor cleared. As Alex led Sophia in a graceful waltz, Eliza discreetly took out her phone, capturing a few shots from her position at the back of the crowd. She was so focused on framing the perfect image that she didn't notice the commotion until it was already underway. Marco's assistant, a young woman who'd been positioned on a small ladder to get overhead shots, had suddenly gone pale and wobbled precariously. "Cassie!" Marco called out, rushing forward but too far away to help. Without thinking, Eliza moved quickly through the crowd, reaching the young woman just as her knees buckled. She managed to steady her and help her down from the ladder. "I'm so sorry," Cassie mumbled, her face alarmingly white. "I suddenly felt so dizzy." "Let's get you sitting down," Eliza said gently, guiding her to a nearby chair as Marco arrived at their side. "I think she needs some water and air," Eliza suggested. "Could be dehydration or maybe low blood sugar." "I'm diabetic," Cassie confirmed weakly. "I've been so busy I forgot to check my levels." Marco looked distressed. "Can you make it through the rest of the evening? We still have 4 hours to go, and I can't cover everything alone." "I'll help," Eliza heard herself say before she could think better of it. "I have experience." Marco looked at her skeptically. "Wedding photography?" "No, but I understand composition, lighting, and capturing moments. I can follow your lead." Marco hesitated only briefly before unhooking the second professional camera from his shoulder. "Basic settings are already programmed. Stay unobtrusive. Focus on guest interactions and details I might miss while I handle the main shots." Eliza took the camera, its weight familiar and somehow comforting in her hands. A spark of excitement flickered to life. Inside her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. "What's going on here?" James's voice cut through a moment of joy like a knife. He stood a few feet away, his expression a mixture of confusion and displeasure. "Their assistant is ill," Eliza explained quietly. "I'm just helping out for a bit." "You're a guest, not staff," he replied, lowering his voice. "What will people think?" Before Eliza could respond, Eleanor Westmore appeared at James's side, her perfectly coiled silver hair and impeccable posture making her look like royalty despite her average height. "There seems to be a problem," she stated rather than asked, her cool gaze taking in the scene. Marco stepped forward smoothly. "Mrs. Westmore, we had a small medical situation with my assistant. Your daughter-in-law has kindly offered to help so we don't miss any important moment of Alex and Sophia's special day. Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly as she looked at Eliza, as if seeing her for the first time. You have photography experience? Yes, Eliza replied, surprised by the direct question. I studied photojournalism in college and worked for several publications before she trailed off, not wanting to say, before I married your son and gave it all up. A calculating look crossed Eleanor's face. Well, we can't have gaps in the wedding album. If Marco vouches for your ability, then by all means, help out. She turned to James. Your father is looking for you. Something about introducing you to his new golf partner. With a last uncertain glance at Eliza, James followed his mother back to the main reception area. Marco gave Eliza a curious look, but didn't comment on the interaction. Ready? He asked instead. Eliza nodded, feeling a strange mix of anxiety and exhilaration. Ready. For the next hour, Eliza moved through reception like a ghost, capturing moments that others might have missed. The flower girl falling asleep under a table, her tiny hand still clutching her basket. The groom's elderly grandfather wiping away a tear while watching the couple's dance. Sophia's parents holding hands beneath the table, their fingers intertwined in a gesture that spoke of decades of partnership. She was methodical yet intuitive, anticipating emotional moments before they happened. When the best man rose for his speech, she positioned herself to capture not just his face, but the reactions of Alex and Sophia as they listened, their expressions ranging from laughter to tender emotion. Marco, checking in with her periodically, seemed impressed. You've got a knack for this, he admitted, scrolling through some of her shots. You're capturing stories, not just images. The compliment warmed Eliza in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time. As the evening progressed, she found herself relaxing into the role, her previous self-consciousness forgotten as she focused on her task. It was during the mother-son dance that Eliza captured what would later be considered the defining image of the wedding. Alex dancing with Eleanor, both with eyes closed, their foreheads nearly touching as they swayed to the music. The lighting created a warm halo around them, and Eliza had caught the precise moment when a single tear slipped down Eleanor's usually composed face. That's extraordinary, a voice said from behind her as she reviewed the image on the camera's display. Eliza turned to find Sophia standing there, looking radiant despite the hours of celebration. You captured my mother-in-law as I've never seen her, Sophia continued, studying the image. Vulnerable. Human. Everyone has those moments, Eliza replied softly. Sometimes they're just hard to see. Sophia gave her a long, thoughtful look. You know, James never mentioned you were a photographer. I'm not anymore. Well, that's clearly a waste, Sophia said decisively. These are beautiful. Would you mind taking a few of my family? The formal shots are lovely, but I'd love some candid ones too. Before Eliza could respond, Sophia was guiding her toward a group of her relatives, introducing her not as James's wife, but as an incredibly talented photographer who's been capturing the soul of our wedding. The description made Eliza's chest tighten with emotion. When was the last time anyone had described her talents with such enthusiasm? As the night wore on, Eliza found herself drawn into conversations with guests who had noticed her working. A cousin of Sophia's who ran an art gallery was particularly interested in her background. An uncle who published a travel magazine gave her his card. Call me if you're ever looking for freelance work, he said. Anyone with your eye for composition would be an asset. James watched these interactions from a distance, his expression unreadable. Twice he approached as if to speak to her, then veered away when he saw her engaged in conversation. It was nearly midnight when Marco connected his camera to the venue's display system for the photo montage that had been planned as a surprise for the couple. He included several of Eliza's shots alongside his own, the two styles complementing each other beautifully. As images appeared on screens around the ballroom, gasps and murmurs of appreciation rippled through the crowd. Eliza stood at the back, a strange mix of pride and embarrassment warming her cheeks. Did you take that one of me with Dad? A small voice asked. Eliza looked down to see Sophia's 7-year-old niece, Lily, who had been a flower girl. I did, Eliza confirmed, kneeling down to the child's level. You look like a princess dancing with him. I've never seen Papa smile like that, Lily said solemnly. He's been sad since Grandma went to heaven. Eliza recalled to photograph a middle-aged man who had been quiet throughout the event suddenly laughing as his granddaughter stood on his shoes to dance. The joy on both their faces had been magnetic. Sometimes people need a special moment to remember how to be happy, Eliza told her. You gave him that gift today. Lily considered this, then impulsively hugged Eliza before skipping away to find her father. As Eliza straightened, she found Eleanor Westmore watching her, an inscrutable expression on her face. That shot of Alex and me, Eleanor said without preamble. No one has ever captured me that way before. Eliza wasn't sure if this was a complaint or a compliment. I apologize if it was too personal. No, Eleanor interrupted, her voice surprisingly soft. No, it was real. All these years of society photographs, always making sure to present the perfect image, and you somehow caught something true. She paused. James never mentioned your talent. There are many things about me James doesn't mention, Eliza replied, surprised by her own candor. Something shifted in Eleanor's expression recognition, perhaps or reassessment. Before she could respond, the MC's voice came over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex and Sophia would like to say a few words before the evening concludes. All eyes turned to the couple as they stepped onto the small stage. Alex spoke first, thanking everyone for coming and expressing his joy at finally marrying the love of his life. Then Sophia took the microphone. Before we end this perfect night, there's someone I want to thank specially, she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. Eliza? Where are you, Eliza? A spotlight swung around until it found Eliza, who froze like a deer in headlights. James, standing with his parents near the stage, looked equally stunned. Most of you probably don't know Eliza well, Sophia continued. I didn't either until tonight, but when our photography team needed help, she stepped in without hesitation, and the results which you've all seen tonight speak for themselves. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Eliza could feel her face growing hot with embarrassment, yet also with a strange, long-forgotten pride. The thing about photographers, Sophia said, is that they're often invisible, capturing everyone else's moments while remaining outside them. Tonight, I want to bring Eliza into the light and thank her for seeing the beauty in our celebration and preserving it so beautifully. Applause erupted, genuine and enthusiastic. As Eliza stood there, receiving acknowledgement she hadn't sought, her eyes met James's across the room. His expression was complex, surprise, confusion, and something that might have been shame. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of strangers' appreciation, Eliza felt something shift inside her, a quiet strength emerging from dormancy, like a plant that had been waiting for sunlight. The ride back to their hotel was silent, but unlike the tense silence of their journey to the wedding, this one felt charged with unspoken revelations. James drove with his eyes fixed on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. It wasn't until they reached their room that he finally spoke. Why didn't you tell me you were still interested in photography? Eliza slipped off her heels, buying herself a moment to formulate her response. Would it have mattered if I had? James looked genuinely puzzled. Of course it would have. Would it? Eliza challenged gently. James, when was the last time you asked me about my interests or dreams? When was the last time you introduced me to your colleagues or family with any mention of who I am beyond my wife? That's not fair, he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. I've always supported you. No, Eliza said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. You've always tolerated me. There's a difference. James sank onto the edge of the bed, loosening his tie with jerky movements. Is that really how you feel? It's how you've made me feel, Eliza replied, surprised by her own calmness. Tonight was the first time in years I felt like myself again, not just James Westmore's quiet wife, but Eliza Chun, a person with skills and perspective and something to offer. James was silent for a long moment, his expression troubled. I saw you tonight, he finally said, talking to people, moving through the room with such confidence, everyone responding to you. He swallowed hard. It reminded me of when we first met, how drawn I was to that quiet fire in you. What happened to us, James? Eliza asked softly. He ran a hand through his hair, disheveling its perfect arrangement. I don't know. I think I got caught up in trying to be what my family expected. And somewhere along the way, I started expecting you to fit some mold too. A mold that required me to be practically invisible. James winced. I didn't see it that way, but yes, I suppose that's what happened. He looked up at her, his eyes troubled. When did I become like this, Eliza? When did I start treating you like an accessory rather than a partner? The raw honesty in his question caught her off guard. For months, years. Really, she had rehearsed confrontations in her mind. Imagine telling him exactly how his behavior had diminished her, but faced with genuine confusion and remorse. Her anger gave way to sadness for what they had lost. It happened so gradually I barely noticed, she admitted. A suggestion here that I dressed differently for family events. A comment there about my unusual background. Until eventually I just folded myself smaller and smaller, trying not to take up space. James stood and crossed the window, staring out at the night. My mother called me after you left the reception. Do you know what she said? Eliza shook her head. She said, "Your wife has an extraordinary talent that you've been hiding from us." Not even a question, an accusation. He turned back to her. And she was right, wasn't she? But the person I've been hiding your light from the most was you. Eliza felt tears threatening and blinked them back. I let it happen too. I stopped pushing back, stopped insisting on space for my own identity. Where do we go from here? James asked quietly. It was the first time in years he had asked her opinion on something that truly mattered. Eliza took a deep breath. I don't know if we can fix this overnight, she said honestly. But I know I can't go back to being invisible. I need to find my way back to my passions, my career, and us. That depends on whether you can love the real me, not some perfect, compliant version you've tried to create. James crossed the room slowly and took her hands in his. I fell in love with your fire. Eliza, somewhere along the way, I forgot that. But seeing you tonight, watching everyone respond to the woman, I first fell for I want that woman back in my life. If she'll have me. Eliza searched his face, looking for sincerity behind his words. It won't be easy. We have patterns to break. I know, he acknowledged, but I think we're worth fighting for. Don't you? For the first time in longer than she could remember, Eliza allowed herself to hope. Yes, she said softly. I think we are. 3 months later. Sunlight streamed to the windows of the small studio space, illuminating the photographs that lined the walls. Eliza adjusted the frame of her favorite image, the one of Eleanor and Alex dancing, making sure it hung perfectly straight. That one still gives me chills, a voice commented from the doorway. Eliza turned to see Marco leaning against the frame, 2 coffee cups in hand. Figured you could use a caffeine boost before your first official client arrives. You're a lifesaver, she said gratefully, accepting the cup. I barely slept last night. I was so nervous. Completely unnecessary nerves, Marco assured her. Your portfolio is outstanding, and Sophia has been singing your praises to anyone who listened since you agreed to this partnership. The partnership had been Sophia's idea, a shared studio space where Marco could continue his established wedding photography business while mentoring Eliza as she built her portrait and event photography career. It had come together with surprising speed once Eliza had made the decision to return to photography professionally. Still can't believe this is happening, Eliza admitted, looking around the bright, airy space that now bore the sign Vasquez and Chin Photography on its door. Believe it, Marco said firmly. Talent like yours shouldn't be hidden. The bell above the door jingled, and they both turned to see James entering, carrying a small wrapped package. Am I interrupting? He asked, noticing Marco. Not at all. I was just heading to the darkroom to prepare for this afternoon session, Marco replied, tactfully giving them privacy. Once they were alone, James presented the package to Eliza. A studio-warming gift, he explained with a small smile. Eliza unwrapped it carefully to reveal a beautiful leather-bound journal. Opening it, she found a first page inscribed with his handwriting. Asterisk for capturing the moments that matter. With pride and love, always, James asterisk. It's for client notes, ideas, whatever you need, he explained. I thought it might be useful. It's perfect, Eliza said sincerely, touching the soft leather. "Thank you." James looked around the studio, taking the photographs that represented her rediscovered passion. "This place suits you." "It feels right," she agreed. "Are you sure you're okay with all this? The additional hours, the investment." "More than okay," James assured her. "Seeing you like this fulfilled, excited about your work, it reminds me of all the reasons I fell in love with you." The past 3 months hadn't been easy. There had been difficult conversations, moments of backsliding into old patterns, and the awkwardness of redefining their relationship while still healing its wounds. But there had also been genuine effort on both sides, and with each passing week, Eliza felt more of her true self re-emerging. James had surprised her with his commitment to change. He'd started therapy to understand his need for his family's approval and how it had affected their marriage. He'd begun introducing her at events with pride, emphasizing her talents and accomplishments. And perhaps most significantly, he confronted his mother about her treatment of Eliza's conversation that had led to tentative but genuine thawing in Eleanor's attitude. "Your first client arrives in 20 minutes, right?" James asked, checking his watch. Eliza nodded, feeling butterflies resume their dance in her stomach. "You're going to be amazing," he assured her, squeezing her hand. "Just like you were that night at the wedding. Remember?" "How could I forget? It changed everything." "For the better," James added softly, as Eliza prepared for her client, arranging her equipment and reviewing her notes. She reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From sitting silently in the corner at her brother-in-law's wedding to owning her own photography business, the transformation still seemed surreal at times. Yet the greatest change wasn't in her circumstances, but in herself. The woman who had made herself small to please others had rediscovered her worth, her voice, and her passion. And in doing so, she had not only reclaimed her own heart, but had somehow managed to win over everyone else's too, including, most surprisingly, her own husband's, as if for the first time. Sometimes, Eliza reflected, it takes being relegated to a corner for everyone to finally see you shine.